the educational system tends to presume that knowledge is what kids need. After they've learned to read and write and do arithmetic, they need this thing called knowledge. And my argument is knowledge isn't very useful. In actual fact, it's very often counterproductive because it creates these categories and boxes that don't show a lot of imagination.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Unlatched Mind. This is Vinny Vallerine. My guest today is Tom Beakbane. The backdrop of our conversation today is Tom's book. It's titled "How to Understand Everything: Consilience, a new way to see the world." I always screw it up. It's a long title, but I mean it's a deep one. I mean this conversation gets pretty deep. The way Tom sees the world and the approach he has to understanding things around us is pretty unique. I mean it's at least it's unique for me. We touch on things, everything from what is consciousness to what, and we actually define what consilience actually is, because I didn't know what the term was before talking to him. So we talk about some of the problems with our educational system and what he thinks some of the issues are there. In a lot of ways, we're doing the next generation a bit of an injustice. Talk a little bit about artificial intelligence and machine learning and kind of how computers learn and understand data and the world around them. We kind of draw a corollary to how we do as people. Anyway, we talked about a lot of stuff. It got deep. This one got deep, but it was super interesting. I found it fascinating. I'm hoping you do as well. But with that, I give you Tom Beakbane. So Tom, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. So we're going to frame the whole conversation around your book. So it's titled "How to Understand Everything: Consilience, a way to see the world, a new way to see the world." Excuse me. Bold statement right out of the gate, but we'll dig into that. But before we do, maybe a little bio on yourself, who you are, and what your background is.
Sure. I'm Tom Beakbane, live in Toronto, Canada. I was born in England in a place called Worcestershire, and had the fortune to go to I was fortunate to go to great schools, went to Durham University where I studied neurophysiology and biochemistry. But right throughout my teen years, I did lots of interesting things. I became a chef and worked in Paris. I tried to become a street painter, putting up an easel in the Place du Tertre and painting pictures and trying to sell them to tourists. When I was, I guess, 20 years old, I worked as a machinist in an engineering company in Philadelphia, and I've just done a whole lot of things like that, which has sort of broadened my mind. After I left university, I was really fortunate to get an amazing job at a large packaged goods company called United Biscuits in London, where I had the opportunity to work with some of the foremost advertising agencies in the world, like Saatchi and Saatchi and so on, and that gave me a good leg up in my career. And when I was like 23, 24, I came to Toronto, worked for Pepsi-Cola as a product manager, and then a few years after that, realized there was a big opportunity in the computer graphics field, because that was the time when people were just sort of realizing that you could draw a picture on a computer, and maybe do some typography. So I invested some money in a computer, set up a business called Beakbane Marketing, which I'm still running, and I've just my life has been extraordinarily blessed, because I've made some amazing friends and been able to work with lots and lots of different companies that has sort of opened my eyes to different realms of human experience. So that's me.
Well, neat. I mean, fantastic. So I guess we got to define consilience first. I didn't know the term, and then I started researching it, and I feel like it's not new, obviously, but I've never heard the term. Define that to lay a little bit a backdrop before we jump into some of the topics there.
Sure, sure. It's actually a cunning word because everyone imagines it's all about reconciliation and advice, the same Latin root as concilium, which you get the Italian consigliere from. But it wasn't coined from that word. It was made up by a cleric and polymath called William Whewell in 1840, and he put together two Latin words, com, which means together, and siliens, which means jump in Latin. So it's the jumping together of ideas from different realms that sort of give one that aha moment. So it's the jumping together of ideas, and I use it in the sense that now there has been a jumping together of all the different sciences, including computing, that enables us to understand the human brain and human behavior in ways that have never been possible before. And so I think consilience, in my terminology, is this unique moment in history where we can understand ourselves in completely different ways.
Yeah, and the thing that jumped out at me is, and I was listening to a podcast. I don't remember exactly which podcast it was, but Neil deGrasse Tyson was on talking about. He was talking about how he's a physicist, and a lot of the ideas and whatnot that pop out in his mind and some of his colleagues' minds. When I think he used the example of he's in the lunch line or whatever getting food, and there's a biologist in front of him and a mathematician behind him, and he's a physicist. And they start talking about things from their different domains. And one gets the other thinking in a way that they weren't thinking because they're thinking of, they're solving the world's problems, from their discipline's perspective, and that commingling of those disciplines really is what it just got me thinking of that. As I'm reading through material, it seemed like that was on point with exactly what he was saying, and so that was an interesting little. And I just had listened to that like last week, so that was timely.
Yeah. I think, life is one experience. When you get up in the morning, you don't divide your life into separate silos. But unfortunately, in academia, just the way it's taught, geography is separate from history, is separate from chemistry, is separate from genetics, and that's had an unfortunate consequence in that we have started to think about the world in these different silos, and so we need more of deGrasse Tyson sort of experiences where people work in ways that are cross-disciplinary and sort of weave the threads together so we can understand the totality of our lives in ways that are more realistic.
And these disciplines. And I think you'd agree with this, but I'll get your reaction here. Because I think I'm trying to keep. By the way, your material gets so deep so quickly. I was like, whoa, man, we're gonna either blow people's minds with how our ability to translate this layman's terms,
or we'll lose them,
or they're gonna completely lose them. Yeah. But I was trying to keep bubbling it up, and it's like I feel like these disciplines are made up categories. Right, just for us humans to understand them. Like they're, and I was looking at something on YouTube. It says, "Was mathematics discovered, or was it invented?" And I was like, "Wow, that's a fantastic question, right?" But it got me thinking, where these disciplines are just constructs that we've created. And maybe this is a question, I guess, are constructs that we've created to organize them and categorize them. And okay, well, you're a physicist and you're a neuroscientist and you're a physician. It's like, but the world doesn't care about our arbitrary categories. It just is. True?
That's so right. Yeah. And I think the reason that I've been able to write the book about consilience is really because I'm not an academic. So I'm not tied to any silo. I'm not a mathematician. I'm not a physicist. I'm not a biologist.
Yeah.
But I'm deeply fascinated by all of those things. And so when you mention mathematics, I get really into listening to podcasts and reading books about, for instance, prime numbers and the magic of prime numbers. And and that sort of takes one into the history and the personalities, and the deeper you go, the more interesting it becomes. But to imagine that sort of mathematics is sort of in its own sweet little universe that's separate from human experience, and the people that create it is not my experience of life.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's almost silly to draw these lines, But again, I think I feel like it's based on our capacity to understand things. We have to, I always I made this analogy before, and some people just roll their eyes. Other people, we have really good conversations about it. But you think about like just everything we do. A house, for example, it's a bunch. A house is created by a bunch of random things we found in nature and have been able to manipulate, trees. We just chop them down, we cut them straight, shape them, water that existed on Earth. We just get it, we put it in pipes. Everything. If you really go through everything, the metal is all melted, or it's just we're just organizing things that exist to fit a purpose, whether it's to understand it or to some utilitarian purpose, or so. It's kind of neat but I think it's just at some point we have to.
It's kind of neat.
Yeah.
and if you're up for it later on, we can actually get into the neurophysiology of understanding a thing like a house and a word like house. Because we just presume, oh, okay, well, a house is a house. What we don't realize is how that word has the meaning it does, and how that's built in our brain from social interaction. So if you want to go,
hey, let's jump in.
Really, really, really deep.
Well, is that the example you had given about if you and I both read the word, say, object on the paper? Was that similar to the analogy you just gave? I think you had said if.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every word is built socially, and so the traditional way of sort of imagining the way the world works is that there are all these objects out there. For instance, I'm holding up a cup here. There's cups and mugs and so on. And what our brain does is it basically attaches a label to those different things. And that we're using our eyes basically to observe these different objects. What neurophysiologists have sort of glommed onto, and it's slow coming because it's so totally counterintuitive, is that when we say something like cup and you just glance this, your brain is actually recapitulating every time you have had an experience with something like that, which has liquid in it, it's plastic. So even though you've just glanced at it, and even though we're 2,000 miles apart, a lot about what you just saw. Well, how do you know that? Well, it's because you've experienced those things through your life, from the time you were a baby, and all the different aspects of it, the edges, the material itself. And so the huge new insight is that it's our brain that creates the sensations and that feeling of, okay, I got it. I know what that is. It's our brain that's doing that. It's not that it's a pre-existing category, of cups. It's your brain and your social interaction that creates that category. And it's a mind-blowing concept, and I don't expect you to understand it. That's why you need to read my book.
Yeah.
But
I understand
because in a strange way, it's anti-science, because historically, science has looked at the world top down. It's presumed that things are pre-existing in separate categories, and the job of the scientist is to label those things and then quantify them through experimentation and observation. But now, with developments in computing, particularly AI and machine learning, we're realizing that actually the way you get a brain, a computer to work and a brain to work is you allow it to program itself. You just give it vast data sets,
a lot of data, yeah.
and then the brain figures out, what those labels are. You don't feed the label, you don't you don't tell the computer the logic to differentiate a cup from a mug. You just give it big data sets. And so so the whole field of computing is now fertilizing and jumping together with neuroscience and more broadly with science. We're realizing that the world it doesn't exist in these pre-existing categories. Everything in the world, atoms and molecules and so on, is built from the bottom up, and the human body is built from the bottom up. It's not built from the way we've historically understood these things, from the top down. Does that make sense?
It does actually make sense. And the reason it makes sense, well, you could tell me if I probably caught half of that, but I think it's really cool. I'm sorry, it's really cool. I'm geeking out here. So the thing that resonated with me when you gave the computer analogy, the AI analogy, right? I'm not an AI expert, but I've been writing software for 20 years. And you had a little video that you had sent me that really kind of resonated where and I think this jumped into your your three surprises, which I do want to cover, at least at a top level, but
I got lots and lots of surprises. Those are just
there's just the three. Okay, yeah. By the way, when you sent me that summary was a lifesaver, because I started going through the large PDF. I'm like, oh man, I need to. This is not going to be I don't care how early I wake up. This is going to be more. So thank you for that summary. But the concept that, like you just said, if it was top down, you could write a couple 100 lines of source code, and you would just tell the computer, this is a mug, this is a cup. That's not really the way it works, just like you articulated. But if you give it mass amounts of data, it will slowly learn the difference between a cup and a mug. Just like I think the analogy that you just laid out, where a cup and a mug is not a thing that exists, and it's just top down. You could just you learn as a human what it was because it always existed. We're sort of learning through the data, nonstop experience, and that's building that concept of cup versus mug. So for me, that resonated, the bottom-up versus top-down approach. Is that generally accurate?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and
okay.
an example of this is how, for instance, Google and other programs translate one language to another. The sort of traditional way of coming at that would be to figure out the rules of grammar, to have a dictionary, where you sort of look up, what the word is from one language to another, and you sort of try and boot everything together. Well, that has never worked. It simply never worked. The way Google and other folk do it is they feed in documents that have been translated by humans, and the computer just starts to figure out what the patterns are. Not through logic, but just what it's seen before, and the ironic thing is, when you let the computers sort of run and do that and teach themselves, it works pretty well. As soon as you get a linguist or a grammarian in there, like saying no, we've got to teach it to do it properly, it screws things up, and so in a strange way. In a strange way, the sort of a scientific way of coming at it, or a grammarian's way, or an educator's way of coming at it, doesn't actually work terribly well. And another example is AlphaGo and all of these computers that are teaching themselves to play extraordinarily complicated games of strategy. They play against themselves, and they just learn and learn and learn and learn. They don't even necessarily need to know the rules. They just sort of look at how initially how humans do it, and then they just play against themselves. So it's a different way of understanding everything, but particularly brains. You can apply that to brains, and you can say, well, brains actually aren't sort of programmed through genes. It's very much a question of an emergent process. Just through experience, you figure, your brain, all the neurons in your brain are figuring out what's around you and how to make sense of it. And then when we interact with people, we can attach words to those things. So it's a different way. It's a different way of thinking about the world.
Yeah, and one thing that popped in my mind as you're talking is how does this inform or affect, or how does this relate to the whole heredity versus environment discussion, where it sounds like as you're, as we're talking through this, that environment, paradigm, what you experience, what you go through as a child, what you see, your upbringing, your parents, all that. I feel like that seems to this discussion seems to be weighing a lot more heavily in the environment versus heredity debate. Is that misguided at all, or?
It's not misguided. I think it's a fair comment, but I want to just take it way further and show you that I'm a complete renegade and weirdo, in that when you use a categorization like genetics versus environment, it's very logical, and scientists have been thinking about that forever. And you can look on the bookshelf behind me and find no end of books that sort of try and sort of argue that point through. My way of looking at this whole thing is that's a completely artificial category. You cannot have genes without an environment, and you can say, oh well, the DNA sort of is somewhat separate from the intracellular machinery. I'm going to get all biology like on you here, but the genes cannot operate without the intracellular medium, which is unbelievably sophisticated, and it's a dynamic system, with these microtubules like pulling the DNA apart and helping control. And I hate the word control, but determining what's going to be what that DNA is going to be doing. So when you take a cell and it starts to grow, from just being a sperm and an egg, and it duplicates and duplicates and duplicates, and it duplicates, something like 40 times into the adult body of like something like 20 trillion odd cells. But at no point can you really divide sort of genes from environment, because they're mushed together. So I'm the type of person that, frankly, frustrates educators, because I just pick apart every word and say, well, yeah, when you use a word like genes, do you really know what you're talking about?
I don't.
and I do the same with I do the same with the word science.
Yeah.
Or any word you can pick it apart and you can say, well, I'm not professing to know what those things are. I'm just saying they're always a lot more sort of complex and nuanced than you're led to believe at school.
Well, that's the point of discussions like this, right? I don't think you'll ever stop, but never stop at that. That's the whole point. Otherwise, if someone had a good word, 2 decades ago, two centuries ago, we just keep using it blindly and just build on a false foundation. Like, no, question everything. Yeah, with you. But in that example, were we defining environment the same way? I guess I'm thinking if I took a person,
the environment as sort of like outside,
like what the data that's coming in, right, to shape your like, in other words, if I took a person, put him in a it's going to be something mean, put him in a box for their entire childhood, they had no input, just food and water to sustain them, IV, maybe they didn't even interact with people or hear the people coming like that person would develop differently than someone who was living a normal life and had friends and school and experiences. And I'm always wondering what the input, how the input of the environment changes how that human brain would develop, right? So that's kind of what I was more meaning, but maybe that's a different type of discussion. But
no, it's absolutely related, and the answer is the brain cannot operate without the environment and without all of the inputs that are happening from second to second, and that includes, the people around you, diet, exercise. To imagine that sort of the brain is a sort of a device there that is, quote, programmed by genes is just not the way. It's just not the way we work, and so to understand people, you've got to understand, everything about their situation and history, and and it becomes a beautiful thing because you become, I guess, more tolerant of different ways of understanding a word like environment.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, and I don't want to jump to this part next, but some of at the tail end of the notes I had sent you, I started thinking about, well, some of these concepts seems like they should be informing policy. This should be someone like you, and I think I said this to a couple of folks on the podcast before, just a few actually. I put you in that category now. Someone like you should be informing folks on Capitol Hill, because there's all sorts of behavior related, policy that goes out that I don't think that, no one's, I don't think any of them are thinking at this level, but it seems like there could be a lot of, utility in this kind of thinking when you're trying to understand why people are fighting, why people don't agree, why there's such divisiveness, the tribalism, and you seem to touch on all of that with such a scientific underpinnings that can't hurt the dialogue, right? I mean, it might confuse some folks.
Consilience, consilience is an idea that that is happening. I don't believe it's sort of my theory. It's what's happening because there have been so many advances in so many different subject areas, but particularly the ways we understand the way cells work and what's happening in your body, and the development of this mRNA vaccine, for instance, as an illustration of just how much the technology has progressed in the last 10, 15, 20 years. I mean, there's simply no way that vaccine could have been developed. Even 10 years ago, we didn't have the technology. Mm-hmm. And so this thing that I describe as consilience is happening, and it enables us to understand ourselves and the way our brains work and the way our brains understand the world and the way we use words to explain things to each other in completely different ways. And I believe the implications are massive, particularly for education, because I think, the more I look at it, the more I feel that educators, even though many of them do, are wonderful and do the very best job they can, but particularly sort of as teens reach the point where they can read and write and do some arithmetic. I believe there is just horrible shortcomings in the educational system, and it gets worse and worse in university. So with a more realistic understanding of what is actually happening in our bodies and how our brains actually work, I believe it completely changes the way one comes at something like education, and even the way one thinks about an interaction like this between you and me.
Right.
Once you understand what's going on, you just think about it in a massively different manner.
Right. Yeah.
Does that sound overblown to you?
No, it doesn't. I mean, I'm an overthinker, so I question everything and want to break down everything to its component pieces down lower and lower and lower and lower. And so this is right up my alley. But I also realize there's not a lot of folks like us. Like I have these
No.
If you ask my wife why I started this podcast, it was to have these discussions without boring the hell out of people that came to my house for dinner. Because I would always end up going deep on everything. And I can just feel, I'm pretty observant and self-aware. I'm like, this is not where they want it to go. Most folks are happy with that surface, and it might be an over exaggeration, but I don't think it is. I think, I enjoy this, but I had to find you, right? You had to find me, and we had to do that. It wasn't just like, hey, walk down the street and just found someone to have this level of discussion with, because it's just a lot of work and it doesn't make you money. And so, but one thing you touched on the universities thing, and I had read that paragraph you wrote, and my comment was so well said. I want to read this out loud verbatim. So if you don't mind, I am going to read. This is your quote.
Sure, go for it.
I think it was perfect. So you say the social sciences that one might hope would empower students with the skills to live cooperatively in groups, instead have become proficient at defining tribal groupings that would otherwise be of marginal significance, and then stirring up envy and hatred between them. God, so true. Pitting females against males, straights against gays, poor against wealthy, white versus other colors, left versus right, and then professing intentions of pure selflessness and honor. man, that just summarizes everything that's going on right now and has been going on, and is only, in my opinion, getting worse. And so I don't know. I just, like I said, I wanted to just read that out loud because I read it and I read it again. I was like, man, he just summarized like in one paragraph what I've been trying to articulate for so long. So, yeah, props there. But the schooling, the problem I think too is, if you adjusted the educational system, I don't think you could start there, because the educational system is really just I think it really just set up to set us up for factory work, right? I mean, it wasn't like, what is the goal? I mean, you and I are going to have this conversation. We're going to hang up, in a week or so. I'll find time to edit this and release it. I'll have learned a ton. I'll have thought at a deeper level. I feel like I'll have grown as a person. All the reasons I love doing this, but then it doesn't do anything. Now, if enough people find it, you can stop monetizing and all that stuff. Sure, right? Hopefully, folks buy your book, and it's a win-win. But it's more that I feel like the educational system is just ready to spit out folks to go sit in the categories that have been established, right? So how do you fix the university problem without, you know what I mean? It's almost like the divisiveness is kind of just a byproduct of what they're trying, what the system is set up for, in a way.
Yeah, that touches on several different themes in my book, and I'm not sure which theme is of most interest now. We could talk a little bit about sort of the tribal nature of
tribalism
the brain.
Would be a perfect start. Yeah.
We can also just talk about my experiences, like hiring people and the types of people that we're finding turning up for a job. We could also go in the direction of why it is that young people now very often feel hopeless, and so because of a whole lot of different anxieties, they're expressing them through the social justice movement, Black Lives Matter, climate change, and in many cases, the actual issue that they're demonstrating, in my view, isn't the real deep issue. The deep issue is that they're looking for meaning. And a journey in life, and then they're not getting it because they can't get a decent, fulfilling job, or they spent too much time in the parents' basement playing video games, or they're on social media, seeing all their friends get up in arms about some particular issue. Now I'm not diminishing the actual issues, and let's address them, but what I am saying is that it, in my view, if kids were armed with the tools by the educational system that give them optimism and confidence and the skills they need to have fun in life and to go on and sort of achieve things that they can feel good about, that they wouldn't be getting up in arms about things that frankly they can't affect, aside from breaking windows and throwing things at people, which isn't good for towns and cities and people that are wanting to live their life in a peaceful and productive
it doesn't work.
manner.
It doesn't make their message ring louder. It just makes people turn against them. But yeah, right.
So if you want, I can just give you a few opinions about what's wrong with the education system.
Yeah, I love it. Sure. Yeah, let's do it.
There's a chapter in my book that I call "Good Morning and Mean It," and what I say there is that the educational system tends to presume that knowledge is what kids need. After they've learned to read and write and do arithmetic, they need this thing called knowledge. And my argument is knowledge isn't very useful. In actual fact, it's very often counterproductive, because it creates these categories and boxes that don't show a lot of imagination. Um, uh, it's far more useful for kids to become passionate and enthusiastic about something and develop skills that enable them to possibly make money out of those things, or at the very least enjoy them. In your case, you love drumming. So I would say, when you were 14 or 15 years old, after you'd learned to learn the basics, I would have said, if I'd been your teacher, go for the whole drumming thing. But not only do I want you to become an absolutely first-rate drummer, I want you to learn about the history of drumming, the culture of drumming, the technology of drumming. I want you to go and visit the factories where these drums were made. I want you to understand about recording technologies. And then I want you to understand how to promote, your group, if you're in a group. How do you push those out through social media? How do you build a website? And that passion for drumming could turn you into an absolute expert on drumming, who knows far more about drumming than the teacher. And my argument would be, well, if you left school passionate about that, and you got up in the morning and someone said good morning to you, you would answer back good morning, and you would mean it, because you felt good about yourself, and you developed skills that would enable you to lead a productive and fulfilling life. So rather than study the lucubrations, as Edward O. Wilson calls them, of this or that scholar, kids should be taught to become passionate about whatever interests them. Whether it's rap or jazz or beauty, clothes, fashion, whatever, it doesn't matter, because all of those things are deeply fascinating, if you allow them to be. And now, with just a few clicks, you can go in whatever direction you choose, and as deep as you want on any of those things.
Right.
There's so much that's available. It's just a couple of clicks away.
Yeah, and the ability
make
to
sense?
modest, it does. And now I'm going back to my drumming example. I remember being a kid. That's all I wanted to do was, I didn't want to go to college. Did not want to go. I'm like, I want to play. I was in band since I was, really, really young. And I just, all I wanted to do. But Dad made a good point. It's like, I don't want you to be a drummer. Now you could say it's a good point or worse point, but a life as a musician, it's not an easy one, and a lot of it turns out to be not what you expect. And so I see a push-pull there. Is it a passion? Is it, do you do more the more stable route? Do you follow the passion? Now as I get older, I'm more thinking passion is always a better way to go, because the money will follow. But there is, I have kids of my own. What would I have recommended? That's a tough one. It's a tough one as a parent, when you want security, you want safety, because unfortunately the world, really, you do need money to be secure and safe and to some level happy, right? There's some number that, there's never a number, but you got to have, but I think a lot folks would say now, I think as I'm and I'm literally, this has been on my mind a lot lately, especially with the kids getting older, college coming up and all that. It's like, there's no number. If you're chasing money, it just can't be. It can't be about that, because there's never a number. There's never, you just, the more you make, the more you spend, kind of thing. It just never. So I do agree. In general, the passion. If you get that in, and the last couple podcasts ago, I did a podcast with a gentleman. It was fantastic, really on that topic, and it was all about motivation does not work. And if you're inspired by what you're doing, really everything else really falls into place. If you're truly inspired, yeah, there's something there. And if neuroscience, like folks like you can come up and say, hey, look, we've proven it, and point to a scan or something, that'll be good.
Yeah. I mean, on this matter, should you play drums or go to college? I would say a better way to look at it is follow your passion, play drums, but have people around you who develop all the related skills. Now, more recently, you've gone into software programming and so on. So while you were drumming, if you had been encouraged to get a computer and set up drum tracks and then record stuff and then program, you would actually end up probably with all the skills that you need,
Right.
and possibly a greater ability to learn new things because you realize just how fulfilling that can be.
Yeah.
So I was lucky enough when I was growing up in that no one ever told me to get an education so I could get a job. And that's why I studied neurophysiology and biochemistry. And my dad and mom always just told me, just learn how to learn, just become an interesting person who can read a book and is interested by those things. And so, when I come to North America and people say, oh, you're in business, what did you study at university? And I say neurophysiology and biochemistry. They say, oh, what went wrong?
Yeah.
But that was never my experience growing up.
Yeah. Interesting. So would you say the school system should be teaching you how to think, not necessarily pump facts and knowledge into your head? Would you agree with that?
I would say that school system should be teaching skills, and skills should be how to write, how to speak, how to get up in front of an audience, how to find information in a library, how to express yourself, how to draw, how to paint, how to play music, how to spin ideas together, how to be fit, how to eat properly. Well, but those are all skills. That's not someone telling you, oh, okay, you have these 8 vitamins and enough protein. No. Figure it out yourself. Become skeptical of the crap that you find in textbooks, because a lot of it's pretty stupid.
Right. How?
Don't tell your kids that.
Yeah, but it is. A lot of these concepts are timely for me. I have a 6 and an 8-year-old, so it's. I'm going through these cycles of I want them to be. I don't want them. Right now, we're going through this thing where I think I'm mostly responsible for it, where they have a feeling of dread on a Monday morning versus a Saturday morning. Right, that just kills me. I don't want them to grow up in this 9 to 5 feeling of, what I mean, that. I feel like I'm kind of between the worlds. Where I'm 44 now, so the old school was that it was very, it was kind of that. You go to college, you get a job, and for the most part, I have enjoyed my jobs for the most part, but it still has Monday has a different feeling than a Saturday. I think that needs to go away. I think every day should be a day of like, what am I going to do that I'm inspired to do today? Hopefully make money doing it, and just, it's got to have a different feel, and COVID has messed it up a little bit because my wife had to end up doing a little homeschool stuff, and the kids were just going in the basement. And we're not a traditionally homeschool family. That's not what we want them to be out there doing the thing we're in a good school district, et cetera, et cetera. So the kids had at this age, their first encounter with real school has been kind of, muddied, and they're just dreading the Monday, go in the basement with mommy kind of thing. It's not like it's a dark, dank basement. It's a finished basement. It's fine. It has nothing to do with that. It's just, and then Saturday to
no
Friday.
handcuffs down there.
Yeah, it's not a dungeon fight. No. But, no, but it's just like I want them to think like, well, what if you're truly passionate about something, you don't care what time it is, how tired you are, what day it is, you're just ready to go, right? You just jump out of bed and you go. And I want them to find that, and not like, oh, I gotta go to work. Like, and I try to do that, like, oh, you going to work today, Daddy? Sorry. I'm like, what do you mean sorry? I'm excited. I get to do this today. I got to solve problems, and I'm trying to really instill that in them. Like, there's not work and play. It's just life. Sometimes you're doing something that builds something over here. Maybe you got to, it's kind of life. I want them to approach it that way. I think I may be failing a little, but I don't know. We'll get there. But
yeah. I mean, I'm far from knowledgeable about that whole area, and I've been very fortunate that my wife was, such an attentive mom. We got 2 girls. They're 31 years old now and 28 years old. But growing up, my wife was, she wasn't a helicopter mom. She wasn't, too coddling, but she was extraordinarily attentive to who they were spending time with, and how they were learning, and I think that has really worked for them.
Yeah.
They're doing well in their careers now.
They're in a whole different stage. I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
You've got through the teenage years with 2 girls, so it is possible. I don't see any scars. You've made it. So
I shouldn't say this, but I never had. I probably raised my voice 3 times in their entire life. Like, they were absolute delights.
Really?
My 2 girls, absolutely, completely delightful, and they still are. And I don't know why that is.
I can hear people swearing from you from the highway. Listen to this in their car.
I don't know why it is.
Screw you, Tom.
Possibly one of the reasons is even when they were babies, I never used to treat them like babies. I always used to talk to them with an adult voice. And so consequently, when they were teenagers, I didn't really have to adjust my behavior and sort of start making that transition from treating them as a child to an adult. I treated them as adults from the time they were literally months old.
Interesting.
And I was a very physical dad. I'd always throw them around, like throw them in the air. We would always go do stuff, go hiking, go camping, go canoeing, go kart racing, whatever the hell it was. Every weekend we would go and do stuff. Not because I felt it was what a dad should do, but I just enjoyed doing it.
Yeah.
And so.
And your enjoyment, your state of mind, I'm sure.
My book is not about being a parent, but being a parent for me has been so delightful.
Yeah.
It's just unmitigated pleasure from beginning to end, and I can't describe how.
Well, a book title, "How to
lucky I
Understand
feel.
Everything," probably touches on parenting a lot, I would imagine, right? Because you're literally reframing how you observe our world, I think, in a lot of ways. So how people interact, how they're thinking. I mean, it would be tough to decouple the two, I think, especially someone that wrote the book. You must be thinking like that all the time. Yeah.
I just want to dispel one misapprehension about the title, How to Understand Everything. I mean, it's a bombastic, boastful title, and that's because I'm a marketing person, okay? Sure. So no one's going to pick up a book that says it's really, really difficult to understand even a fraction of the things in the universe.
Right.
Or
if it was titled How to Understand a Couple Things.
I don't, my point is, the more you understand, the more you realize how little you know. And that actually should be on the cover of the book as a little asterisk. There'd be a disclaimer there saying, oops, this is a lie, this How to Understand Everything. The How to Understand Everything is when you understand how your brain works, better, it makes you more open to different ways of understanding things and living your life, and it makes you more appreciative of everything that you love. You love sports and drumming and hanging out with your kids and food and your Italian heritage, and so it makes you more appreciative of all of that.
Oh yeah.
And and that's an important takeaway.
Yeah. Now, where are the haters? How controversial are some of these concepts you're throwing out there? Right, that you can't be. I don't think you could be this forward-leaning scientifically like you are. I mean, I feel like it's you're pushing that edge, that boundary of you're not just towing the line, and you're not affiliated with any discipline like you had said earlier, so you don't have to toe the line of it. Which is that freedom is what I think we all need for folks like you to actually be knocking down walls of new concepts and new ideas. How mainstream is this? What are the haters saying, et cetera, et cetera? I could probably.
That's an amazing question, and I've never been asked that question before. And when I wrote the book, it was partly I started writing the book over 20 years ago, and the first version was a rant against all of this ideas in psychology that just seemed so completely divorced from what I was experiencing in my business, in my marketing business. All the scientific ideas, the psychological ideas, the ways of categorizing people and using statistics to to supposedly understand what was going on just didn't make any sense to me at all. And so that was when I started like spending a lot of time in science libraries trying to understand the science. And the first version of the book was just a rant, and that's why I never published it, because no one would have read it. But I wrote this version of the book at the beginning of the lockdown because I was becoming extremely concerned with the discourse relating to particularly politics and not only in the United States, but Canada, the UK, mainland Europe, this polarization that's been happening, but also the social justice movement and the hate that's being whipped up from every quarter, and also climate change, because I love learning about the environment, natural ecosystems. I enjoy spending a lot of time in nature. And I realized that much of what we hear about climate change are basically talking points. And I've got a nose for political talking points. I can understand what they are and how they work, because that's partly what my business is all about. And I found it really disturbing that the journalists that were working for mainstream news organizations and newspapers just didn't seem to know what was going on, and they were polarizing into these various different camps, and I could see it heading in a bad direction, and I still see it heading in a bad direction. I think the Western world is heading for catastrophe. I know that sounds overblown, but I think we're very close, and I wish more people were worrying about it.
You mean with our divisiveness and the tribalism and is that mainly?
Yeah, we don't realize we're only a few bullets away from a full-on civil war, unfortunately. But I wrote the book because over the years I'd learned to look at things differently, because in the marketing game you can't say, oh, well, I'm not going to sell this to Republicans because they're idiots, and or I'm not going to sell this to climate change deniers because we hate them. No, you take people as they are and you listen to them.
That was the same group, wasn't it? you got to dig the other side here. You got to dig the other side now. Come on. Just joking.
Yeah. Well,
no, you're right. I mean, it has you don't care about the politics. You don't care about the side A or B.
I'm not into left or right. So going back to your very, very interesting question.
Yeah.
I picked the word consilience because I'm a branding guy, and I realized that as soon as I started digging into these questions about what is science, and that some of these topics like the social justice movement and climate change, they're extraordinarily divisive, and some of those words have become what I call tribal banners that immediately polarize opinions, and I realized that I could quite easily be vilified because one side would see me as operating for the other side, sure. whatever side that is. I call them the hold firm tribe, which is sort of the more traditional way of looking at the world, and then the climb higher tribe, which is sort of more academic modernist view. I didn't want to be identified with either side. I wanted to be associated with this word consilience, which is not, well, let's all agree, but let's really understand what's happening at a deep level and how our brain is instantly and fluidly tribal. Whenever we hear a word like Trump, depending on who you are, your brain immediately says, that person is either in my tribe or outside of my tribe.
Right.
And so, I fully anticipated that I was going to catch some big flack at this point. Maybe this is the start of it. Thank you, Vinny. I haven't caught any flack.
Yeah. That's an interesting story. Yeah. Now I can't let someone like you go without asking you the age-old question. What is consciousness? We'll end with this, but I know this is usually an opener question, but I realize I didn't ask you that targeted question. So, what do you think it is? What do you know?
What is consciousness?
Yeah.
So consciousness is the feeling that we have when we're doing what we're doing right now. With our eyes open. Me perceiving you. My sense of my body all around me, the environment. The noises, the smells, the touch, that's consciousness. And the word consciousness also has meanings that are semi-mystical and spiritual.
Right.
And I say, well, we don't need to diminish the significance of the spiritual aspects of life, of course. But from my perspective, consciousness is just how our eyes and ears and skin and our neuronal systems work. And I would say, for thousands of years, people have been trying to figure out what consciousness is and how it happens. And I say, well, now just look at what the neurophysiologists have discovered. You don't need any crazy theories. You don't need you don't need to think up anything strange. Just look at how it evolved, and look at how our eyes work, and it's not very difficult to understand. And I deal with it, I think, in 14 paragraphs in my book, and I've uploaded a video saying Consciousness Explained, and I've been asking people to take a look at it and give me some critiques on whether, what's right and wrong with it, and no one's come back and said, oh, that's a crazy idea. So consciousness is how human beings build up a picture of the world around us so we can navigate through it and do all of the things that we need to do. But it's not just a human thing. It started evolving, I would say, over 500 million years ago, in the Cambrian period. When there was a flourishing of multicellular life forms that had sort of neuronal mechanisms in eyes, and they were bilaterally symmetrical. That's the point at which the basic building blocks of consciousness started to be put in place. And so when you take your dog for a walk, your dog's conscious. Otherwise, it couldn't put one foot in front of the other and step over things. That's what consciousness is all about.
So if I can extrapolate that, no real difference between human and the rest of the animal kingdom, or just, I mean, there's maybe differences in the degree to which we can feel and observe and all that, but there's no real difference. There's no giant camera.
It's not like consciousness is a feature of primate physiology that was bolted on, in the last couple of million years, like an aftermarket car part. Right. Absolutely not. The core mechanisms have been at work. That isn't to say that everyone's experience of consciousness is the same. My experience of consciousness is different to yours, and to your dogs, and to a salamander that runs around on the wall outside. We all have a different experience of the world around us, and our senses are different. But there's nothing particularly magical about what's happening in the human brain. That all the building blocks, like for instance in language, can be found in other mammals, and actually in the case of language, what's remarkable is the genetic building blocks can be found in birds. That's why you get gray parrots that can speak quite handily.
Yeah. So you get into the whole mind versus brain thing, and is that even a thing? And then I think humans we're always looking for deeper meaning. So we and I haven't thought this through, but I'm just kind of bouncing off what you had said. I think we're looking for deeper meaning all the time, right? Obviously, you've got religion, the spiritual side. So you add the word mind and consciousness, and you start to separate that from just the biology and the things that, that you could physically touch and all that stuff, So it gets complicated, but it goes back to meaning. I think there's a consistent theme to a lot.
Can I just make this
sure.
Make this point?
Yeah.
That I think it's necessary when you're trying to understand how our brains work and human behavior. I think it's necessary to separate science from spirituality and all of the different realms of life that give us meaning, and so to sort of conflate spirituality and mind and brain, I think is makes the whole subject unnecessarily confusing. In fact, if you use all of those traditional ways of thinking about the world, do we have free will or not? Which part of the our system is controlling other parts? Is the amygdala only involved in emotions, and is there system 1 and system 2? All of those traditional ways of looking at things get in the way of us just recognizing how things work, and we need to separate the science from other realms that give meaning and direction to people,
right?
Like spirituality and religion, and going to the gym, doing yoga, and riding their bike, and or doing physics, whatever it is. We need to be more appreciative of what gives us meaning.
Right. They each contribute in their own way, but conflating them makes the whole thing muddy. Yeah, that's something to think about. And I appreciate your time. I want to respect your time. We've been going for a little over an hour here. Where can folks find you? Where can they get your book? And what else do you got going on?
Well, if you Google Beakbane, Beakbane, and Tom Beakbane, you can probably find my website, which is howtounderstandeverything.beakbane.com. But just Google me. But the book is available on Amazon. It's available as a hardback, an ebook, a paperback, and I think the audiobook is fantastic. It's narrated by a British actor called Philip Batley. He did a super job with all the different accents, and I would recommend that.
Yeah, I'm an Audible.com guy, so I will be checking it on Audible for sure.
If your listeners are into understanding the world in new ways, I would love it if they bought the book. It's not as though I make a lot of money from selling books, but I'd really appreciate having a dialogue with people that get some sort of meaning from the book, and possibly if they're critical, I'd like to engage with them.
Well, this has been great. My brain hurts a little bit, but in a good way. This is good.
Thanks so much, Vinny.
Yeah, you got it.
You're a cool dude.